So things that make up your daily energy balance. So what we're looking at putting together is a T, D, E, E. So this is your total daily energy expenditure. So this is the thing we're trying to predict when I get somebody new on board and I'm like, okay, what do they burn in a day? And there's a bunch of things that make this up. So the first one, the largest portion, is your basal metabolic rate. So the basal metabolic rate, that is, if you were to just be lying down in a coma, doing absolutely nothing except for staying alive, what does your body require to stay alive? So the energy required for your heart to beat, for you to be able to breathe, to maintain a core temperature that keeps you alive. And that is mostly, when you're predicting it, based on your weight, height, and age. So those things come into what this might be. Once again, it's an estimate, and different people do tend to run a little bit hot or a little bit cool. So this makes up the largest part of total daily energy expenditure. The next biggest contributor is called NEAT. So this is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So what does that mean? Is what do you burn that's more than just existing in a coma, but it's not my exercise? What do I burn on a daily basis? And the things that contribute to this are like people who fidget, me right now, swapping my pen around from hand to hand as I'm talking, the energy expelled in talking, in getting in and out of my chair, in going to the bathroom, in talking, fidgeting, breathing, laughing, your mannerisms. And this is something that is quite interesting because calories in can affect this part of calories out, particularly carbohydrates. And I would go into this in more depth on a session just probably on that. But when I say that, I don't know if you notice, and you probably notice it more in kids than yourself, when they've had a hit of sugar or they've had a nice good meal, they're more fidgety, they're more talkity, their energy's up, and you see that that's all extra burning of energy. So if you stay within the same calorie balance, but you've eaten a combination of foods and macros that make you move more and talk more and have more energy, then that can affect your NEAT levels. Sleep as well. If your sleep is really low and your energy is low because of that, and so you're a little bit like slower moving, you're not using as many postural muscles to hold you up, that's another thing as well, just your daily postural muscles, like everything being on to hold you upright. So when you're sleepy, you might talk less, you might talk a bit slower, you might use less facial expressions, everything's just a little bit slower. You're burning less calories in your non-exercise activity. So once again, this is another thing of why I'm looking at like how you're sleeping. When things start to plateau, sleep is what I try and manipulate everything other than taking your food down first, because that's not fun. And there's other, obviously, negative outcomes of eating less all the time. So it's my last tool. So I'm looking at all of these things as much as I can first. You okay, Laura? Oh. So NEAT is that next one. So that's, compounding everything you do in your day that's not actually exercise, but it's all your movement and those things that are burning calories. The next one people don't think about too much, but I've kind of just brushed on it with carbs. Just giving you all of these letters today. So TEF, or the thermal effect of food. So this is where understanding macros becomes really useful. So one of the reasons why I put protein quite high, other than the fact that it's more filling and it helps bias towards maintaining as much muscle mass as possible when you are cutting weight, because you do lose some muscle along with fat any time that you're losing weight. They will lose together. High amounts of protein avoid losing as much from your muscular tissue. So that's one reason. The other reason is that protein uses more calories to digest than carbs or fats. I'll explain that a little bit more. So other than the fact that protein already is only 4 calories per gram, as opposed to like fat that's 9 calories per gram, protein itself uses some of those calories. All food uses some of those calories to be digested, protein more so than the others. If you were to eat 100 calories of a single macronutrient, that's really hard by the way, but of any macronutrients, if you ate 100 calories worth of fat, you'd burn somewhere between 5 to 15 calories digesting that fat. Much closer to the 5 than the 15 in most cases. If you're eating carbohydrates, you will also burn somewhere between 5 and 15 calories of that 100 calories by digesting your carbohydrates. Somewhere usually closer to like sort of 10 to 15. With protein, if you're to eat 100 calories worth of protein, you will use somewhere between 20 and 35 calories to digest that protein. So the amount of calories that you actually absorb and that contribute to your potential weight gain is less from protein than from your other two. So that's another reason why I often program protein as a good chunk of your diet. So there's many reasons why protein should be on the higher end than what most people tend to eat. But when it comes to dieting, making sure that you feel full and making sure you're getting the most out of the food that you're eating, that's why protein can be a really useful tool. And those who are eating sort of below 60 to 80 sometimes even lower when they come to my program, once they up their protein to above 100, a lot of the time they're like, I can't eat this much food. I'm not that hungry. I must have been eating less calories than this before I started with you. No, what you were doing was eating food that was more energy dense and not as filling. So, Laura, I'm not sure if you could overhear any of that we were just talking about. Just really quickly, I'll recap. So what I've gone through here is the thermal effect of food, which is another component of calories out. So it's how many calories you burn by digesting particular macronutrients. So we went through, first of all, if you were to eat 100 calories of fat, you would burn somewhere between 5 and 15 calories by digesting that fat. Usually a bit closer to the 5 end. With carbohydrates, if you eat 100 calories worth of carbohydrates, you burn about 5 to 15 calories to digest that carbohydrate. Usually somewhere between 10 and 15. With protein, when you're digesting protein, if you've got 100 calories worth of protein, you burn somewhere between 20 and 35 calories by digesting that protein. So other than the fact that it makes you feel fuller and it contributes to maintaining muscle while you're losing fat, because when you are losing fat, you always lose a combination of muscle and fat together. You can bias it to protect as much muscle as possible by keeping protein high, but also while you're dieting, keeping protein high means that by default you're in a deeper calorie deficit for the fact that it burns more calories to digest. So that was the fast version. The last contributor to total daily energy expenditure then of course is exercise. So you've got your basal metabolic rate, what do you burn to exist, how much do you burn fidgeting, talking, doing your normal everyday activities, how much do you burn by eating itself, the process of chewing, eating, digesting, and then on top of that, then it's your actual, what do you do on purpose to try and burn calories or your exercise in the day. And obviously there's, once again, just how hard are you actually working in those sessions is going to affect how much is burning there. So it's always an estimate, because even one day to the next, you are not going to be burning the exact same amount of calories. And when I'm setting calories, we keep it as an average for the week, and I'm looking more over the average of the week, because even your calories out is more about the average over the week. Because you might burn 4 times as many calories one day as the next, but over the week you tend to sit on a pretty even average with your general lifestyle, because over the course of the week you tend to do most of the same things, whereas day to day is not necessarily For example, on the weekend, you might go for a hike every weekend and you burn way more calories on a Saturday. That doesn't necessarily mean you need more food on that day, but over the course of the week, the energy balance usually stays pretty much the same. So once we work out total daily energy expenditure, I've got an idea. Okay, so for example, I think this client of mine probably maintains somewhere between 1900 and 2200 calories is their maintenance range. There's usually about 500 calories, give or take. But we're just going to say, for easy chat, if someone's maintenance calories are 2000, how far below do I want to go if we want to start seeing fat loss? And how do we work that out? Hey buddy. So some other maths is that for every pound of fat, or for us who don't use pounds, we just talk about it as it's about half a kilo. So every half a kilo or 500 grams or 1 pound-ish of fat, there is 3,500 calories. So 3,500 calories per 1 pound of fat. So a good rate of fat loss is approximately 1 pound of fat a week, or 500 grams of fat a week. And so we need to work out as well, how do we get 3,500 calories in a deficit to predict that we're losing at about half a calorie or half a kilo a week. So I'd bring this down from 2,000 calories a day to 1,500 calories a day. And that means you're in a 500 calorie deficit per day on average. And across the week, you're in a 3,500 calorie deficit. And that should be averaging around a pound a week of fat loss, or around half a kilo of fat loss. Does that make sense? So this is what I'm looking at. So when I'm doing all the maths and I'm setting things up and down, this is how we do it to start with, and these are how our estimates work. This part of the math stays the same the whole time, but working out what that total daily energy expenditure bit is, that's all estimates based on a couple of formulas to work out total daily energy expenditure. Once I'm getting your biofeedback and I can see what your weight is doing, I rely on that, and like I said, the other biofeedback markers to work out whether we need to be going up or down. But in a nutshell, that is energy balance and how we predict it. In the same way, if somebody's trying to gain weight or build muscle, you're going to want to be in a little bit of a calorie surplus. So working out the energy expenditure is the same, and this still applies, that to put on weight you need to be increasing calories above your total daily energy expenditure. You probably don't want to be increasing weight by half a kilo a week, because you can't grow muscle that fast. Unless somebody is trying to put back on fat after a period of being sick or something like that, or a period of time in a sort of starvation for whatever reason that might be. Usually that would be due to sickness, and you probably have a dietitian working on that, not just like a health and fitness coach. You'd have somebody really specialized if that was the case. However, if somebody's trying to put on weight for muscle, I'd probably be looking at about half of that. So probably averaging, trying to get around 250 grams increase on a week-to-week basis. So you'd be looking at a month, about a kilo, would put you in enough of a surplus that you can grow some muscle in a really, I guess, in the most optimal environment. You will gain some fat along the way as well, but that is part of growing muscle, and that's why you see bodybuilders who are going through their bulk period, a lot of the time they push that over the mark, but you do need a little bit of extra body fat and to be in a bit of a calorie surplus to be able to grow muscles in an optimal state. So for the average person, you don't necessarily need to go through big bulks and big cuts. We can keep around maintenance for muscle gain, or potentially in a slight surplus. But for most people, if they haven't been training really heavy for a really long period of time, even at maintenance range, you will still be able to grow some muscle at a nice rate. You do not want to be in a calorie deficit while trying to grow muscle. It's just not an optimal environment to grow. You definitely want to still be training hard to maintain the muscle that you have when in a deficit, but you're not necessarily going to see muscles grow in size while you're under your maintenance calories. So when looking at total daily energy expenditure, and once again looking at how can I avoid cutting your food down any lower but to still get you a result, or to see maybe why has this diet stopped working, having a record of how many steps you take on average can help. 10,000 steps tends to be the average recommendation. For some people, 10,000 steps is a normal part of their day, and like that's not necessarily going to be able to help lead them into a deficit. For some people, 10,000 steps a day is a real effort, and it's on top of what they would normally do. 10,000 steps equates to, once again, it definitely depends on how many postural muscles you're using and how are you walking, or how you're walking. 10,000 steps a day is approximately 500 calories, approximately. So once again, if you have an average of 10,000 steps in a day, that's an average of 3,500 calories in a week, and it's another way that we can manipulate the calories outside without having to manipulate the calories inside. Or if somebody's steps are really high for a really long time, and they want to be able to bring them back down because they're like, this is not maintainable now, or we're just gone into winter, I'm not going to be able to go for my walks all the time, knowing that they're going to be coming down, might mean that calories need to come down a little bit to maintain the same result as well, or find another way to be able to increase calories out. So that's another thing that we're looking at in the overall burn. But having an awareness that 10,000 steps is about 500 calories. Don't look at your trackers for calories burnt for anything, by the way. They can be grossly overestimated a lot of the time. Use them for steps, use them for sleep, use them for heart rate, but I wouldn't use them to be like, oh, this training session just burnt 1,200 calories. I'm sorry, Rhonda, it probably didn't. You probably burnt 300 to 400 calories, but if you then go into MyFitnessPal where it tells you to eat back your calories, which like, do not do, because we've said it already knowing that you're going to be exercising. But if you then go and eat that extra 1,200 calories, why eat back what you've just burned? If you've given yourself a bonus of a little bit of extra calorie burn, why make it harder for yourself by eating more today, which means that you need to stay in this deficit for longer. So if you burn extra calories or you think you've burnt extra calories, take it as a win, unless you've done something really difficult or really like sort of endurance type stuff and you're getting to the point